I have the privilege and honor today to interview Frenchie, who spent 32 years incarcerated, and he was one of the founding members of the first known centering prayer group in prison. So, Frenchie, briefly describe what is centering prayer.
Centering prayer is probably the most simple form of meditation that I've ever been involved with. All it requires is you to be able to be left alone. It doesn't require a quiet place. You don't have to sit. You don't have to stand. You get comfortable, take a few deep breaths, and clear your mind. Before you start your meditation, you need to decide on a word. That word is called your sacred word, not so much in a religious context, but in its meaning to you. The word I used and have used for years that worked for me is breath. It allows me to let go and return to life and living and God in my situation. So when you get comfortable, you gently, as Thomas Keating would say, like a feather landing on a piece of cotton, introduce your sacred word. And what's going to happen is you're going to realize you're thinking. So you're laid back, you're comfortable. All of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm what's for chow? Oh, breath. And let that thought go. And you simply do that the best you can for 20 minutes.
So, when a thought or noise or something that draws attention away from being present, then use the word.
And always at the end of your session or your sit, you need to take a few minutes because as you develop in this practice, you'll start doing what's called unloading. And you may need to take some time to think about a good place, a good thought, good feelings, and come out of your sit feeling good. Because sometimes you can drag some of the other garbage out with you. So always when you end your centering prayer sit, think about, somebody you care about. Think about something good going on in your life. And that's the simplest form of centering prayer that I know of. You're just shutting up and being still for 20 minutes. Centering prayer, especially in prison, is a way to let go of the garbage going on around you and the garbage going on inside of your head. Working through some of that, it feels pretty good. You learn to let go of this stuff. Prison is a violent place, and there's a lot going on and a lot of things to frustrate you. And I found through my own personal experience, if I sat, 2 times a day, 20 minutes a day, it let me learn how to let go of things as they were happening, not after the fact, nor was I going from stimulus to action without a little bit of thought. So centering prayer is a very powerful tool to help change your life. You're opening your heart to God as you know him. It's, it doesn't matter whether you call him Allah, whether you call him Yahweh, whether you call him Jesus, whether you call him God, Adonai, or all the other different words that we have for God in our wonderful world that we live in. All you need to do is open your heart to the spirit involved in that, and God takes care of things. That's where the work actually comes in centering prayer for me, is that opening my heart to my God and my belief. And everybody can keep their God and their belief and do this.
It's wonderful. It's very accessible then to everyone. I would be interested in you telling us how you got started in centering prayer. What attracted you to centering prayer?
Well, the truth is, a close friend of mine who lent me the book Open Mind, Open Heart by Thomas Keating wanted to start a group doing that. He had been meeting with some people up in the upper room of the chapel, and he invited me to come, and I read the book, and I kind of got enthused. I started practicing it and had what we call the warm fuzzies, which really even sold me more on centering prayer. That was before we started getting into the unloading part and learning how to actually let go and how to peel away layers of the false self. Yeah. So the journey for the next 10 years, I don't think I missed any meetings that we weren't on lockdown or didn't have a problem going on.
Frenchie, what is it that is meant by those words, false self?
We all as individuals spend our lives putting layers of protection over who we really are. Who we really are, I call the essence or the true self. As we grow up, we start putting these layers over to protect ourselves. It's like first time you got hurt by a girlfriend breaking up with you, you put over a layer of protection. First time you got in trouble with your parents, you put a layer of protection. You spent your whole life putting these layers of protection over you and develop quite a ego, and that ego is your false self.
French, I'm wondering if after you began this practice twice a day, 20 minutes, it's quite the commitment, if you started noticing any changes within yourself.
I didn't notice any real changes within myself, but other people around me started noticing. I wasn't flying off the handle like I normally would. I would stop and ask a question like, do you know what you just said? Or something like that, instead of immediately reacting and going off. Centering prayer changed my outlook as far as how I dealt with people, and they noticed the difference. Bottom line is that it works, and people do notice.
I'm hearing that you were less reactive. That seems like a huge change. Is that true?
Very true. I came into the prison system as a very violent individual. I will never claim not to have deserved to go to prison. The animal that came to prison needed to come to prison. And I was pretty rough. I was pretty tough. I bought into the game and got into trouble. It took me quite a few years to get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And the problem with that is that you just can't keep going the way that I was going and not end up in a high security, max security, total isolation prison. And when the opportunity was presented, I started doing centering prayer. And like we shared a moment ago, it changed my whole outlook and attitude. Prison is the same. You get up every morning, you might go to the yard or you will go to a meeting, and that gets old, until I found centering prayer. That started changing my outlook. I started looking forward to going to the yard. I started looking forward to being with friends. I developed true friendships in our centering prayer group. You can't sit in a circle with 50 men with your eyes closed, meditating, looking at a candle and not get close and have serious discussions after your sit. And people open up and share things. You just go, whoa. And it just changes the whole environment.
Would you say that those changes were like the fruit of your practice?
Oh, very much so. Perfect or best example I can give is of my sister, Jeanette. I got arrested in 1984. We had no contact whatsoever till actually 2 years after I got out of prison. And then my dad was starting to die. He got pancreatic cancer, and Jeanette stepped up and was providing care. Well, I had developed a very good relationship with my parents. So Jeanette and I began to interact, and we got to know each other again. And after it was like 2 weeks, she asked me a question and I gave her a straightforward, honest answer. She looked at me and said, "Who the hell are you? Where is the brother that I knew?" I'm going, "I don't know that I understand." She says, "You're not Philip, because Philip is self-centered, narcissistic, all about himself. And all I've heard here is concern for your dad, concern for your mom, concern for me. I contribute all of this to centering prayer and my change of attitude, because this is about taking care of dad. This is helping mom and my sister get through this." And that's the bottom line. And that's what my outlook had changed to.
You had said that you developed these close relationships with the other people that were attending the centering prayer group. It seems like in a prison environment, about the last thing someone's going to do is to open up and share at a deep level. So how did that happen?
It's a result of the group. When you sit in silence with somebody for 20 minutes and you start doing that week in and week out, whether you're doing it in your cell, whether you're doing it in a group of people, you develop a closeness. And I think Ray Leonardini said it best in his book, Toxic Shame. It's really about that first person starting to open up. The sitting together creates trust, creates an environment where you feel more comfortable with the men around you, even though there are major differences sometimes in you and your philosophies and the way you look at the world, but they find a sharing of companionship. And we all start finding that true self sharing. And centering prayer helps you find that type of a relationship. So you've got these guys that are now comfortable and in a safe environment. And the first guy says, look, this happened to me as a child. And that makes it okay. All of a sudden, everybody is now in a zone where, well, if he can do that, I think I can match that. Mm. And we started sharing at levels that were just totally amazing, because you're talking about what we call lifers, guys who don't have a date. There was a couple of sex offenders in our group, and those are in the prison hierarchy are frowned on, but accepted. These people developed a camaraderie that is totally blown me away. They cared more about each other than why we were here and what was going on in the prison system.
I'm interested also in knowing if it was difficult to commit to twice a day, 20 minutes.
The commitment was fairly easy because CDC built-in times, California Department of Corrections, built-in times where you had to be in your cell. You have to be up at 6:30, and that gives you that 20 minutes. The only problem is everybody's getting up and getting ready, so you have to make sure you educate all those around you what you're doing. Then you have what we call standing count from 4 to 4:30, and everybody usually naps during that time, and that gave me right in the middle of the day a perfect time to do my sits. 20 minutes was a long time when I first started. Sitting there cross-legged or sitting and laying in my bunk trying to do this, 20 minutes, I keep looking at the clock and, it's only been 10. It's only been 15. But eventually you do develop to where you really just start losing track of time, and you start needing a timer to let you know it's time to come back. It's a process that if you do it, it'll grow.
Prison is a very noisy atmosphere. So how did you handle that kind of activity?
Noise is just another thought. When you're doing your meditation, the whole point of it is to let go of your thoughts and develop that closer relationship with God. So when your neighbor yells over to the other neighbor in the bunk, hey, you got an extra shot of coffee? My word that I use in centering prayer is breath. Breath, let it go. Next thought comes, breath. And you keep on doing your meditation, and you just incorporate whatever goes around you. Your bunk feed gets out of his bed. The whole rack is shaking, and you're going like, oops, okay, breath. And return ever so gently to your meditation.
I want to circle back to what you called about the unloading. What does that mean, the unloading?
Unloading is kind of hard to describe. When you get past the initial, hey, this feels good, this is really great, you're slowing down the mind a little bit and you're relaxing. When I teach centering prayer, I use an analogy of we have this little room in our mind, and we call that our subconscious. And if you open that door, it's nothing but filing cabinets of files everywhere. Files on the floor, files sticking out of open drawers, files stacked on top. It's a mess in there. Well, as you do centering prayer, there's a little guy in there that runs over here, picks up this file, looks at it, and he throws it up for you to look at. Okay, as you start, you get all the surface debris, the light stuff. There's nothing that really bothers you. There's nothing serious. But then every now and then, this guy starts getting some serious stuff. Something that may have happened in your childhood, something may have really affected your future, or decisions that you made, that gets thrown up. If you're doing your centering prayer appropriately, you realize you're thinking about that, you use your word and you let it go, and then that little critter files it in the right place. Sometimes they surprise the heck out of you because you didn't know they were even there. Mm. And that's when you start getting into some serious unloading. But again, I've never ended up in a situation where I couldn't handle what was thrown up. And sometimes you really feel like throwing up when you're viewing some of your actions to your past or whatever. It gets sometimes pretty heavy.
Did you see any kind of effect in the general population?
Well, first off, when we first started the centering prayer group, we had to run a rotation of the inmates that got to come in every week. We had 400 people on our roster. And that is a tenth of the prison population, and that can affect the outside prison population. All it takes is one to start a change. Well, if you've got 50 people coming out recharged every week and 3 to 4 weeks of people rotating in and out and everything else, and then everything that goes on in the buildings and the sharing that goes on in there, yeah, the environment starts to change. People around, like me, they were not flying off the handle. They were not creating violence. They were not stabbing people. Minor offenses were that normally would result in violence were let go and corrected. Racial tensions dropped. When you've got guys from opposite gangs, they get to know each other and they start setting aside some of their differences. So the whole prison environment can change. That's what happened, I believe, at Folsom. We went from a very violent place to it was pretty good, pretty good. In fact, one of the staff made a comment in the news. Folsom is still one of the most dangerous prisons in the system, but it's because of the things going on there, it's become the safest.
I'm wondering if you have any advice for someone who would like to start practicing centering prayer, for that person who doesn't have a centering prayer group and doesn't have a group of people to talk about it.
When I was transferred to another prison, there was no group there. There was me. If I was looking to get involved and learn centering prayer, there's 2 sources that I would definitely recommend, and that's Open Mind, Open Heart by Thomas Keating. There's also a pamphlet available through this group that's called Locked Up and Free. If you read either one of those, you can learn how to do centering prayer properly, and then just start sharing it with friends, because you're going to have a lot of friends that are really sick and tired of being sick and tired too. And once they realize the change that's possible, that's what happened back at Folsom. That's where, one guy shared it with another guy who shared it with another guy, and each of them started sharing it with other guys, and it took off from there. It's a good thing. That's all I can say is do it.
What gets the person over that hump of, what am I doing sitting here with my eyes closed doing nothing?
The first time I confronted that, I came to a realization where things just explode. You go, wow, wow, wow. Well, right in the middle of a sit, I came to realize that doing this sit and doing this practice, I haven't gone back to the hole. I mean, I've been out here on the main line for 2.5 years and growing. I'm developing relationships. I'm developing friendships. I'm interacting with people. I have a good job. If you got to do time, this is not a bad way to do time. And when I found myself not wanting to do my sits, I immediately started doing a personal evaluation of what's going on, and that just comes natural after you do the practice for a while. You start looking at yourself and asking yourself questions that you normally would have never thought of prior to doing centering prayer.
There's another transition, and that is from being incarcerated to being out. And would you tell us about what that experience was like for you? And then in what way was your centering prayer practice helpful in that transition?
I was paroled with what they call self-parole, which means I have no home, I have no nothing. And you had to have somewhere to let go of that. There was just too much stress going on, too much. I was homeless. I had nowhere to go. I worked out to where I started staying at a mission, but then you had to spend 2 or 3 nights out before you could go back in. And those nights were long. And I found that my sit times kind of increased during those times. 30 minutes and okay, 35. Okay, we better get back to reality here. And, so those sits became my way of letting go and my way of relaxing.
Frenchie, I know that you are part of a group now, and would you explain what this group is and how someone could access that once they're out?
It's called Outside the Walls. And the only qualification for this group is you either did centering prayer in prison or was trying to learn centering prayer in prison, or you were a sponsor that went into a prison to allow these groups to happen. And we get together on Sunday nights and we do our 20-minute sit. Then we usually have a little bit of discussion. And right now we're reading Toxic Shame by Ray Leonardini. Now we're doing sits over Zoom, and the energy is there. You can feel it. It's palpable. If you get out of prison, or when you get out of prison, take a look at finding a group out there. You're more than welcome at outside the walls. So come and join us and learn more. We're willing to work with everybody, no matter who you are and what the situation is. There are no rules other than you did or got involved in centering prayer in prison. These guys, I'm getting close to guys I didn't know in prison, guys that were in other prisons. But I'm finding out, what I thought may have been unique is not all that unique. Prison is prison, and it's a tough life where no matter where you're at, whether it's a violent prison, whether it's a mellow prison, you still got to do time. And centering prayer was my salvation.
Thank you so much, Frenchie. It's been a pleasure and a joy, and I appreciate very much. And thank you for your insight, your encouragement, your wisdom, and for openly and deeply sharing your experience.
You're welcome. My pleasure.